Good morning, good evening, and good day. Welcome to Expandly, and welcome to another episode of the e-commerce hack series. We talk a lot here, and get asked by our clients about: is my business right for expansion? What point in my business should I be expanding? Not just about the barriers. The barrier part is well documented. Lots of content out there. This is more about a client asking, or a seller trying to understand: have I got the right products? And is it the right time for me to expand? So we're going to spend some time today looking into the data insights sitting behind an e-commerce expansion. This is specific. If you're watching this on catch up, this is specific to Q1 and 2 in 2024. It's June 2024 at the point of recording. So we're going to be looking at some data insights from the early part of 2024, and we're going to finish off by trying to put together a roadmap using some of that data and some of the trends that's there. And for this, we're really lucky. We're being joined by Drew Kennedy from Zyla. Zyla is a payment service provider for US businesses, a multi-currency account for transferring funds. So it's an essential part of any international expansion into new countries. Drew, welcome. Thanks. We're on massively different time zones, but thanks for getting in for us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ricky. Thank you for having me here. My name is Drew Kennedy. I am the head of our partnerships and enterprise division. So that can be handling our partnerships with the service provider like Expandly, or our partnerships on the enterprise level with marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart. So I oversee that, help expand, and also manage those partners within Zyla. So yeah,
thanks.
I'm gonna kind of I'm just
you're the right type of right guy for the job. I think we should look at some insights.
Yeah. So I'll start here. Let me present. So I want to kind of go over some of the data too, and this is data that came out at the beginning of the year, and it's based off the merchandise trade volume growth that the World Trade Organization expects trade volume to actually pick up from 0.8% last year to 3.3% year over year in 2024, right? So economists are predicting that we'll see less economic scaring occurrences, like, for example, the pandemic that really impacted the trade volume around the world, like the Suez Canal, for another example. And also the war in Ukraine, like that pushed up energy prices, food prices, and led to higher interest rates in the United States as well. But what we can say is that countries like China and East Asia are a big part of this global growth, right? So a lot of customers in the US, around the world, they are still getting their supply from China. So they're obviously going to play a big important role into that. So next slide here, I want to kind of get into e-commerce growth and how that stacks up against traditional retail sales growth. With Zyla, a lot of our customers, majority are in the e-commerce space, right? So my thinking is really there's always going to be some sort of global issue that's impacting growth in the economy, right? Whether that's traditional retail sales or e-commerce growth. But what I can say now that it has never been easier for an e-commerce company to expand globally. And I'll get into more of that, of like my points being why in slides later to come. But here you'll see, with the pandemic, both retail sales growth and e-commerce sales growth dropped significantly. But you'll see e-commerce sales growth is still superior to the retail sales channel here. And then next, so everybody knows North America as a strong e-commerce market, strong retail sales growth market. But I want to talk about some of the other countries here and what the data is showing us, right? So here, the top 10 countries ranked in the top 10 in retail e-commerce sales growth. You'll see countries like Philippines, Malaysia, Brazil, Argentina, a lot of Latin America, right? So Latin America, for instance, Brazil, does not allow cross-border e-commerce sellers to sell on their marketplaces, right? So there's companies now that we work with that are helping our US-based e-commerce sellers expand into these markets, right? So there are 1P seller on 15 different marketplaces with exclusive rights to 6 different marketplaces in Latin America. So before, you knew there was opportunity there, but there was a barrier to entry. Latin America has known to have red tape, right? It's difficult to sell there. You don't know what you're really getting into. So you kind of just shy away from it. But now there's companies out there, service providers specifically, that can help you tap into these new markets. A lot of our customers too, like Mexico, right? So Mexico has Walmart and Amazon now, which are actually pushing close to Mercado Libre, which is the biggest marketplace in Mexico. So the point being is, of course, the US is a strong market, but it's very intriguing to see the growth of these new markets start to push up and understand the why behind it.
And these the numbers that are in red, Drew, are they just being highlighted because they're high? They're not presumably not negative.
Yeah. Those are just those are like the main marketplaces, like from the past. Okay. Those numbers.
We've still got strong growth in Europe and North America, but you're just highlighting that India and Latin America are even higher. Yeah,
of course, but like these countries, the volume stacking up to say North America. They're much smaller numbers, but it's showing there's significant growth. Like Philippines, 23.5%. That's just year over year growth. So that just shows that there is new markets tapping it into the e-commerce space, and more and more people want to get their product on these marketplaces, right? So there's a lot of suppliers out there that can mass produce products or really forming a brand. Like, I think that's another important part to make too, is there's always been might have been a narrative that products coming from China or Southeast Asia, that there might be, the quality might not be there, right? But I think it's really shifted recently with China brand owners. They're really investing in shifting that narrative. It's a big brand. They are ensuring the quality and making the investment behind that. And I can say personally, like, it does not impact the way I purchase, and I don't think it is much of a factor when buying, right? If you get something on Amazon, there's a good chance that it might have been manufactured in China, right? So the quality is there. But my point being is that the Southeast Asia suppliers, manufacturers, and China suppliers and manufacturers, they're really shifting their focus on becoming these brand quality product sellers on these marketplaces. So a lot of our customers with Zyla are small to medium sized business owners, and they are the ones that are really driving this e-commerce growth, right? So on Amazon, the data tells us that over 60% of Amazon sales come from independent sellers, and 50% of which are small to medium sized business owners. And World First, also a sister company of Zyla. So what Zyla is to the US, World First is globally. 90% of e-commerce sellers, their turnover is less than $10,000 a month, right? And 50% of which are millennial or Gen Z. So of course you have the big brand owners driving a lot of the growth, but 60% of Amazon sales coming from independent sellers, like that just shows you the amount of sellers that are selling on these marketplaces, and that really the SMEs are the ones that are driving this growth. But of course, starting a small business is extremely challenging. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I know what that path can look like. But, past that initial stage, like to the numbers, 90% of businesses can fail within 4 months, and 30% of which fail within a year of that 90%. But it's getting past that initial startup phase into the next slide here. So being the benchmark here at $1 million, you can take a look at, if you get past that initial stage and you scale, there's real growth there. So data's telling us, once you reach the $10 million in annual revenue mark, you're growing at a 1.45 rate. And then of course, getting up to 100 million is at a 1.76% growth rate. So you can see that, of course, it's difficult getting there, but the numbers are encouraging, telling us that once you reach a certain milestone, the data is telling us that the growth is significant.
And we know from the global e-commerce experts client base who are in 3PL warehouses in the UK and in the Netherlands. These are the clients that thousands of clients that we've expanded over the last sort of 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
We know that the sweet spot for international expansion, say from the US into Europe, as a good starting point example, is typically around 5 to 10 million of turnover. And that, the sweeping, because it depends on, the type of products and your value and GMV and whatnot. But fundamentally, if there's a seller that comes to us and they're selling, less than $1 million a year in their home country, generally the advice is you need to stick at that until you've got over that hump. And once you get into 5 to 10 million, that's the time to start going internationally, and you've really got the capacity to then take your business through to 100 million plus. And we deal with plenty of sellers who are only just arriving on the international scene at nine plus figure sellers. So
and that's sweet spot. The sweet spot makes sense too, right? Because they need a service provider like Expandly if they really want to take that growth to another level, right? They need to tap into somebody who's an expert in that specific category to really ensure that growth. Like $100 million company, they probably have that in-house. They've hired somebody. They've maybe have gone through that stage, but Expandly's customer in terms of revenue is very comparable to ours in the small business, small SME space. Anywhere from like really 2 million to 15 million is a lot. What makes up a lot of our customers.
We deal with a number of success stories within our business of back bedroom style entrepreneurs who have now got 10, 25, 50 million buck businesses selling on Amazon, a niche product which has really just hit the mark, and they are flying, and they're now selling internationally. Got it all dialed in with some really simple tools, some easy ways of taking the money home, when we can talk about that there. So, I think this really does help to, you're over the hump. You've got through the hardest point of building a business, putting together some processes, finding a good product, sourcing it, taking some stock, all that real hard bit that happens at the beginning when the turnover is low. For someone, for a brand that's into expanding into new countries, they're through that. We have a lot of sellers that approach us. They're just beginning and they want to go global immediately. And the advice always has to go, hold back, concentrate on the important parts. Obviously, you'll need some currency and a currency wallet moving forward if you want to buy abroad. But that's that sweet spot when you get past the benchmark point on that chart there. It's a really good way of illustrating it.
Yeah. So next, I kind of want to really talk about the typical challenges going globally. Like, what are the common factors expanding to new countries, and how do you overcome these challenges? So, of course, cost is a huge one, right? And what comes with cost is also risk, right? When you go into these new countries like the UK or EU, the data is there to back up your suggestion to go into this new market, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to do so. So, or even opening up just a bank account to do business in a specific country, it might require a physical presence, right? And just unfamiliarity with the marketplaces, how they operate, like knowing what products are going to sell. But this is where how you overcome it is really relying on the data that's out there. There's so much data that's going to give you the insights to a new country, a new marketplace for you to sell on. You're a proven brand product selling on Amazon US, selling on Walmart. and you're ready to take that next step into a new territory, a new marketplace. But when opening up this is where I will kind of talk about Zyla. So when you're expanding into a new country, like say Mexico, for instance, it requires a physical presence to open up a bank account, right? So in order to do that, it takes a huge investment for your company, right? You need to say, hire new staff. We say at least 3 people, right? Somebody to handle the customer service, somebody to do the sales, and somebody to do the marketing, give or take, right? Those 3 positions. Instead of doing that with Zyla and our multi-currency accounts, you can actually set up a Mexican peso account. Let me go back. You're expanding into Mexico and you're selling on Mercado Libre, right? And they settle in Mexican pesos. So you need to open up an account for that expansion, right? So instead of opening a local bank account, you can open up a Zyla Mexican peso account, right? Without expanding into that new country with staff and investment, you just open up a specific account and bind that to your Mercado Libre marketplace selling account. So what I mean by this, it's really limiting not only your investment, but your risk. You can tap into these new markets and test them out to know exactly what's going to work for you and what's not. So this is where the service providers come into play, like Expandly and Zyla, to help you tap into these new markets, but really limiting your investment and your risk overall. I think it's, like I was saying earlier, it's never been easier to tap into a new marketplace or a new country because of all the data out there, but also the service providers out there that are experts in their space. It can help you and guide you through that process.
We can touch a little bit in a moment on the actual some examples of data which are some examples of product niches and things like that, which give you some insights to help build the roadmap. But I think some of the challenges that come with unfamiliarity, there's so much insight out there now, isn't there, in terms of making these things available. And like you say, there's so many tools to take those things away that really, for me, on that list there that you're talking about there, is more about, can I underwrite the cost of additional stock? Because fundamentally, you're going to need some stock. The actual cost of an expansion, again, if you took as an example, a seller going from the US into Europe using Expandly, the cost of that typically is less than they're spending on Amazon ad spend each month for a monthly subscription to the software. The actual cost of the expansion itself is a relatively insignificant part of buying a container of goods or air freighting some goods into Europe, storing them in a 3PL warehouse here in Europe. Really, that part is the cost. It's about stock. But of course, the flip side of that is that you're increasing your balance sheet value at the same time, because you've got a bunch of stock, and it's something that that you're good at, as in it's already proven, because you already know that you sell that stock and you can do a good job. Now, I've been creating online content and webinars for years, and I always use the analogy to Americans of, as long as you're not selling spurs for cowboy boots or gun racks for a pickup truck, things that are truly American and won't necessarily transfer into an international market. Well, they might not transfer to a European market. They might transfer to other markets. At that point, you know what you're good at. Your product's tried and tested. It's already got reviews. You already know that the client, that the end users enjoy it and they like it. You know that you're not getting too much in terms of warranty or returns, because you've already done that piece. So actually, these pieces really do distill down. Actually, this is all that's left. The stock that you need to buy, and familiarizing yourself with what's required for the international markets. So when it comes to a platform like Amazon, for instance, that you're already familiar with, it's the same Seller Central whether you're selling in the US or in Mexico or in Germany or in France or in Spain. It's the same Seller Central. So this is something that you're already familiar with, but what you might not be familiar with is the nuances of how those customers actually go and buy. So I think whilst these things that you talk about here, Drew, are challenges, these are stumbling blocks that have been knocked down so many times by so many sellers, and it's kind of a well-trodden path. It's like the Boeing 747 route from New York to London. It's been trodden a number of times
Yeah.
to get people into the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I really encourage the audience to you understand what your pain point is, you understand what your fear is of going into a new marketplace, but match that up with a service provider that's an expert in that space. It's at least worth the conversation to have with a company that's an expert to know whether or not you want to make that expansion into a new country, right? Because I think that there's so much value to different companies that have now come into the market. From what you were saying, like sellers in the past have faced all these challenges, and now there's these service providers that are readily available to help these companies expand into the UK, expand into EU, and it's very interesting. There's so many different ones out there, but I think you really know when you talk to somebody the value proposition that they have and the services that they can provide. They hold a lot of value to you.
Well, you definitely want to make it simple. You need it to be, the minimum
Yeah.
number of people that you need to deal with, so that someone who actually understands your needs, and actually, hopefully by the end of this webinar, we'll give some clarity over what the roadmap might look like.
Yep.
Once you've got a roadmap, the key thing there is you can make a plan. And there's not been one successful international expansion that I've ever been involved with that hasn't involved a really good plan. So
Yeah.
putting that path together. So okay, look, let's move on a little bit and look a little bit more into some of these data insights that Expandly can add into the mix, that gives us a bit more background into how we the kind of niches that are running at the moment. I think Lily's got some slides that she can put up for us to start that bit running. So let's overlay the information that Drew's put on there with from a more domestic perspective in terms of looking from the inside out, and let's just look for a moment from the inside. The US e-commerce market globally, just under £1 trillion. This is pounds GBP. So we're on 1.25, 1.3, something like that. 1.2 from the dollar. But so if for somebody who's tuned into USDs, just look at these, relative to each other. This gives you an indication of the market size. When we start talking about Canada, for any American seller that is looking to expand internationally, we would always ask them, even from the UK perspective, are you selling in Canada? It's an easy first win. You can generally dispatch or fulfill from the US, and getting yourself set up, geographically is quite easy. Currencies generally match together, and you can use your Zyla account, no doubt, to be able to get your Canadian dollars back into USDs. So then you start talking about some of the wider markets internationally. And let's look at the European market, for instance. You've got about a tenth of the opportunity of the US market within the UK, about £100 billion GBP in terms of the size of the market. Now, for a very small country, let's say, we're smaller than Texas, we're buying a lot of stuff online. So the scale of the opportunity starts to increase. But actually, where it starts getting a lot more interesting is if you combine these into a European opportunity rather than those individual countries. Because once you've broken down one of the barriers to Europe, generally you're home and dry in terms of rinsing and repeating in into more countries. So once you've got your goods into the EU, you've got access to the whole of the European Union. Once your goods are in the UK, we made a mess of that when we left the European Union. But when you got your goods in the UK, you've got access to the UK. And when you've got your goods in any European country, you've got access to those really useful and lucrative German and French e-commerce markets. Now, above that, once your goods are international, and once you've got a currency wallet that you can start moving some stuff around, you then on the wagon of being able to in terms of translations. Expandly will handle the translation of your listings in an instant to move you to new marketplaces, to new countries, and handle your compliance of those pieces all in one place, all in one software portal. So all of a sudden, toggling on in literally in one click on inside the portal gives you access to these landscapes of people. And combined, we're talking about 500 million people within the European Union alone, let alone the numbers that you're looking about on the top line. Now, you can't help but stare at the monstrosity of the size of the Chinese e-commerce market. And actually, within our e-commerce expansions, we're doing very little in reality to enable sellers to access the Chinese market. Generally, it's a closed door. And we're really talking about that's a single domestic spend within China. It's quite awesome to see that number. You know, it's in round terms about double of what everything else goes on the rest of the planet. So just help to put in perspective where growth numbers could move towards and the scale of what's going on globally in terms of what that looks like. And certainly, you know, if we're talking about the international expansion of US sellers into Europe, it pales into insignificance in comparison to what Expandly and Global E-commerce experts are doing for Chinese sellers coming into Europe, because there's a lot of sellers. Amazon are onboarding thousands of Chinese sellers a day onto their platform. Sellers, not buyers. So just gives you an indication of what the scale of the market looks like and the scale of the opportunity. And this is e-commerce money. These are this is what's being purchased online in a foreign currency that you can take a piece of and you can take back to your home country using a Zyla account to transfer from one currency into the other. Let's move on then slides wise. So wanted to zone in a little bit on the changes that have happened since 22, the changes that have happened within e-commerce. We've got this massive spike of growth that Drew showed us on the first graph on one of the first slides through COVID. Then e-commerce died away a bit. We were all a little bit bored of buying, frankly, a lot of stuff that we didn't need online whilst we were all stuck at home. And we had this great big elation of being able to go back to stores, back into bricks and mortar retail and see things and touch them before we bought them. So then there's a spike in 22 in terms of non-e-commerce trade. What's happened now is, although we've seen this decline through the recessions and these global crises that Drew was mentioning, what we've seen now is a maturing of the e-commerce market. And we've seen a lot of this in terms of our current expansions through the course of 23 and the early part of 24. We're seeing a much more mature style of e-commerce expansion, the type of sellers that weren't previously selling on Amazon. I'm not talking about the stuff that is bought in bulk, is being replicated in China and is being sold on Amazon, you know, with traditionally what was long margin, sold on Amazon, relatively mediocre quality, passable, but the kind of stuff we were all buying online. What we're seeing growth now is not necessarily just SMEs, not necessarily just big businesses, SMEs as well, but we're seeing things like boutique cosmetics, we're seeing boutique supplements. We're still talking about these millennial Gen Z sellers for a lot of the time. We're still talking about SMEs, but we're talking about much more niche products which previously weren't selling on the bigger platforms in the way that more general mainstream products were. We're talking about bespoke portable electronics. I'm in our media suite here in the UK in Southampton, and our warehouse is full of really interesting bespoke electronic devices, and also medical devices, typically slightly bigger in terms of the funding required, typically slightly larger organizations. But these organizations are now selling on Amazon, selling online, and bringing kind of the maturity of the e-commerce market further forwards to where it was even in 2021, when there was this mass frenzy of people buying. So all of a sudden, a new opportunity in e-commerce has existed. Previously, these were things that were maybe only sold D2C online. Maybe they weren't majoring on online sales. These types of products are really beginning to gain a lot of strength in e-commerce and on Amazon. And of course, once you've gone through that journey, if you've got a niche product like this at home, and you've never really thought about the opportunity that you might have to expand. And I'm not talking about supplements, cosmetics, and medical devices and whatnot as the only things or the top things. Just giving these an example of things in the past that wouldn't have had an e-commerce opportunity or wouldn't have been typically sold on Amazon. So let's delve a little bit more into what those things look like to give a little bit of perspective. And we're talking here about the UK market because our service providing company, Global E-commerce Experts, is handling some examples of these types of products. So just to put this in perspective, we're talking about something seriously niche here. We're talking about pet supplements and human well-being supplements. We're talking about supplements specifically here in this in this table here. We're talking about dog supplements. We're talking about health supplements in capsules for your dog. This is not something that was being sold online even just a few years ago, and this is not something that was triumphing on Amazon. And this is not something that your average entrepreneur was selling in big numbers online. But just look at some of those numbers there. Some example products that are coming up for 1.5 million. This is GBP, 1.5 million. So even more of that in dollars and USDs of monthly revenue online of dog supplements. I mean, just to put that in perspective, nearly 18 million bucks, 20 million bucks plus for 3 sellers online for dog supplements. And the market totally dominated, over nearly 60% of the trade running through just 3 businesses online. So by going more and more niche, and we've created some content before on niche, but the more niche that we get, the more capacity we get for the segment being uncongested and for getting a really good size of it. And there were a lot of feedback from some of that content from sellers who were slightly further back in their journey, hadn't talked about how they take their money home, hadn't talked about the compliance pieces, hadn't talked about how they solve these issues. But actually, this is more of an opportunity to talk about, look, actually, when we start going into niche pieces here in terms of data, it really starts to underpin the scale of the opportunity. And I'm not suggesting this is only suitable for people who sell dog supplements. This is about finding a niche which is suitable for you to be able to sell online. Let's move on into some of those other categories because we've got a couple of other examples here. This is portable power banks. Now, we're in a pretty gathering into a slightly more congested element of the market here, but just again gives you an indication of the size of market when it comes to these really large portable power stations. We're not talking about just kind of USB packs here. We're talking about big high volume units. There's a lot of money involved in these in terms of it, and we're still talking about multi-million dollar pound GBP businesses for just 3 sellers in the UK market alone. We're not talking about the European market. We're not talking about France or Germany, huge e-commerce markets. We're talking about the United Kingdom here as an example of the scale of the opportunity. So if you're looking for growth within your business and you've got a product which is within a niche, really gives you an indication of the size and capacity, 1,000 or more of these really significantly priced opportunities, much higher up the pricing food chain than we would typically see in 2020, 2021. The average price was right of people are spending online was right down to kind of 15 or 20 pounds, 30 bucks. We were talking about as a kind of average spend. Some of these things here are significantly higher value. Let's got one more example, I think, I've got some spa bodies, so we're into cosmetics. Much more complex when it comes to the compliance side for cosmetics, because the cosmetics have to be registered and they have to have their ingredients checked. Once you're over that hump, and of course you already have that for your home market, because the rules aren't super different to around the world. Fundamentally, you'll have your ingredients and things and product ingredient lists and those types of safety files. Once you're through those humps, you're registered. Again, really significant opportunity that comes in terms of revenue. Again, 3 products, not 3 brands, 3 products making hundreds of thousands of monthly revenue and multiple thousands in terms of units. So all this information is you can scrape this kind of data from you're right, the right kind of data apps that are doing that. I think we've probably used Helium 10 to be able to scrape this data. Might have used Jungle Scout, one of those two. But those proprietary tools will give you the insights that you'd need to understand. Okay, have I got the right product? Have I got the right opportunity? And typically, we see in terms of the barriers. Now, it's interesting that Drew talks about some barriers, because we're talking here about what we typically find the challenges. Go on to the next slide, please, Ellie. So the hesitations that we tend to get, which includes, how the hell am I going to get my money home, and how am I going to be able to pay my bills in Los Angeles or wherever I might be. But that's just one of the complexities of product regulations and taxes and bits and pieces like that, along with dealing with lots of platforms. And of course, when you come to Europe, one of the big things that you hear is this omni-channel noise. You can't just sell on Amazon. You've got to sell on multi-channels. Whereas at home, you might get away with selling on Amazon. Maybe you've dabbled with Walmart, but fundamentally, when you come to Europe, it's a much wider landscape, because different countries have different marketplaces. Amazon's not always dominant. It is in the UK, it is in Germany, it is in some of the other European countries, but it's not everywhere. So all of a sudden, you've got the difference of, I've got multiple marketplaces, I've got multiple languages, I've got multiple compliance pieces. So pulling all that together in one piece, you've got multiple currencies, perhaps using one wallet account requirement. So we talk a bit about how you could apply Zyla alongside Expandly. So to give some example insights there of the types of things which sellers are finding a challenge, or the types of things which are currently, in terms of data, with looking at the holistic, the bigger picture that Drew showed us right at the beginning, in terms of the wider, more holistic look of e-commerce as a whole, and then getting more into the nitty-gritty of the scale of opportunities that still exist in what's been a pretty challenging few quarters for all e-commerce sellers. Drew showed there some of the details surrounding the proportion of businesses that fail, and that kind of slow, steady decline in e-commerce that's happened, or e-commerce growth that's happened. As COVID has dissipated out, and that ridiculous spike that we were all thinking was real life, but of course, in our heart of hearts, we knew that it really wasn't real life. So let's begin to start to build out the roadmap, because that's where Expandly and Zyla start really working well together. So the challenges that come about alongside the payment piece, which comes right at the end, before you start this journey, you need a software portal that will help you with making sure that your products are compatible with the market. You'll have done some research before that, and you're looking at reviewing your labels. Typically, we're looking at things like, are the ingredients in imperial measurements like they are in the States? Are they making statements that are not allowed in Europe? And have they got the right kind of GS1 barcodes, for instance? Those are typically the kind of things that happen in label review. And are you going to get some products which are specific for the market? Are they in the right languages? How have you had them translated? Are your safety data in the right language? So there's a label review piece that comes out of that. And then there's some more boring compliance pieces like taxes. Everyone hates it, but we've got to pay it. We have to do it. So we get registered for taxes in those particular countries. And that's where you'll start to need some financial background in terms of having the right currencies and the payment gateways in place. So those things sit within your Zyla wallet later on when you're paying your taxes. The other thing is EPR, which is an environmental tax, which is paid on the inbound by the importer. So you pay that off in a kind of one-off fee, and once you've got yourself sorted, you are able to trade away, and you get you pay a fee up front for what you're importing. Beyond that, you need a responsible person in the country. Responsible person is a local address. So as Drew was talking to earlier on, some sellers have an entity. Some marketplaces demand a physical presence in that country. Amazon, of course, doesn't demand a physical presence in that country, but it does involve somebody standing up and saying, "Hey, you use my address. I'm the place where, from a safety perspective, and from a compliance perspective, I'm the people that there's an address in the country that does that." Once you've got through that, then we're into shipping and customs. You might send a full container load. You might send some pallets, LCL. You might send some cartons. You might use Amazon Send program. You might use the EFN program. There's a bunch of different things that you can use if you're an Amazon seller, and you can also put your goods into a 3PL. And that's where the fulfillment comes from. And it's important to have good fulfillment because you might get some returns as well. They need to manage those, and they need to travel cross border, or they need to be categorized and put back into stock or disposed of, depending on how things have gone on. So the general listings and inventory management that comes from that is key. When it comes to your listings themselves, if you're selling across Europe, as an example, you're going to need to translate. Certainly, if you're even selling in Mexico, you're going to need to translate your listings. You can only go so far with your expansion in a different language, and at that point you'll need to run in native tongue, and you can use a tool like the listings translator tool, which is an instant very funky tool within the Expandly portal to transfer both your listings and your optimized content, your A+ content and your optimized content, all the way through in various different languages around the world. And that helps. One of the pieces that helps you organize your marketplaces. You can go on more marketplaces in Europe. There's a dozen or more significant marketplaces, but certainly you'd want to be on at least 3 or 4 outside of Amazon to make a significant impact into the European market. So you want that to be super seamless. You want to manage your listings between them. You want to manage your inventory between the marketplaces, all in one place, all in one portal. And then beyond that, you might want to add some additional countries. You might want to create a VAT number in a new country or in Europe and try that as a new opportunity. You might want to try a new marketplace as you replicate this moving forwards into new countries. So all of these things are going to generate, hopefully, some cash and some cash in local currency. And that's where a Zyla wallet will start to give you the opportunity to take your local currency home into US dollars if you're watching from the US. Drew, could you talk to us a little bit about how those currency pieces work? Talk a little bit about what the currency fees are like and how easy it is if you've got, say, some euros and some GBP from a European start point.
Yeah, so Zyla, what we say is one world account for your global business, right? So you're in the US, you're a US licensed business, you're selling on these different marketplaces. And to my example earlier, you've reached that point where I want to go into the UK and expand into a new marketplace, but like I need to have a digital wallet and a multi-currency account that can really streamline this process, right? So a lot of our customers, they're selling on Amazon UK, they're selling in the EU as well. And what they'll do is they'll set up a Euro account specific to a marketplace. Like say, I want to set up an Amazon UK GBP account, and they nickname it, right? And it's a dashboard where you can see all your different currency accounts all under one platform. And it's also a 24/7 platform as well. So if you need to collect or pay utilizing our platform, you can do so any time of the day. Another huge thing is like, let's say you're collecting in GBP and you need to convert that currency. With US local banks having a background in commercial banking for about 9 years, I can really speak to the kind of rates and costs that come associated with US banking fees, right? When you're converting a currency or you're setting up treasury management with a US local bank, those fees can really add up, especially as your volume starts to grow. So having a provider like Zyla and offering the competitive rates that we do, it becomes that much more important, right? Because of course you want to be able to collect your money too, but it's important that you collect as much of that money as you can after the conversion is done. So that's where we come into play outside of just helping companies have a currency account. It's also being able to convert on our platform where our rates are updated in real time and they're extremely competitive, because we want our customers to know that they're getting a good service from us, and we know our competitors well, and we stack up well against the market.
Okay, well, let's that gives a really good indication, or really good kind of summary, I think, of the typical barriers. We've talked, sum up where we've been the last 45 minutes. We've talked about the global economy pieces. We've talked about how there's been some barriers to, or what the typical barriers to international growth might be. We've talked about the typical place that's the sweet spot for when you might want to expand. So assuming you've run through this from the beginning and you happen to be knocking down all the barriers along the way, you've got the right size organization, you've got the right type of product, you've got the right underpinnings in terms of funds and ability to underwrite stock. You've taken through some barriers. You maybe got a niche product that you think might be an opportunity, and that's not to say those are the only opportunities. Those were examples of how currently we're seeing some really interestingly different types of sellers starting to sell internationally. And we're really starting to see Amazon getting really excited. The account managers at the global selling team in Seattle getting really excited about some of these sellers who previously had no international aspirations whatsoever, to say, wait, oh my God, the data and the insight is telling us that really there is a great opportunity existing right now. So I hope that this has really given some background into, given a bit of insight into what the latest trends are. And as I say, we're recording this June 2024, and is indicative of the kind of first half of this year. And likewise, an indication of the roadmap, what looks like. Drew, just want to say thank you for joining us. Can sellers approach you directly, or is that something a seller could do directly with using your contact details there?
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome to reach out. Any questions, scenarios you want to run by me. I appreciate you having me today. I really enjoyed my time here.
So yeah, happy to connect with people watching on LinkedIn. You just find me easily through my
LinkedIn, email.
Yeah. And then beyond that, we'd want to say thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming on and bringing some really fantastic insights. In the next few episodes, of the Hack series, we'll start to uncover some of the more detailed parts of your international expansion when you arrive. Some of those barriers in more detail with some different service providers. In the meantime, if you have any other queries surrounding it, you can get in touch with us. And I hope you enjoyed today's show. And we look forward to hearing and watching. Look forward to delivering you some content in the future. Drew, thanks very much.
Thank you, Riki.